All right, Eve and I are back for another Destiny 2 video. I've been making these kind of all in a row because there hasn't been much to talk about with other games, and there's a ton to talk about with Destiny. I am not going to go further down my hero shooter rabbit hole from yesterday, and I also wrote an article about that already. So I want to get back to what I was originally going to talk about yesterday, which is kind of my first experience with Vault of Glass, which has now turned into a second experience because I ran it again yesterday. And this is opposed to me just like watching the world's first race and seeing how they changed the raid and actually getting to experience it myself. A disclaimer for this is that I'm going to talk about how I think this is now one of kind of the easier raids in Destiny, very much so by kind of a wide margin in a lot of regards. That said, I fully understand why this was so challenging on day one for many people with contest mode on, and then especially doing the challenges. It is very easy to understand why certain sections would be much harder in challenge mode as opposed to, or contest mode as opposed to normal mode, which it is now, which has really kind of totally changed the dynamic of the raid and altered almost every encounter. And I think this is a prime example of why raids need a hard mode, and Vault of Glass is getting a master mode later, so that is something we are going to see in, I don't know about all, but at least a lot of future dungeons and raids. I think DSC was another example of that, where it got to a point where it was just kind of super easy to blow through, and I think most raids get to that point eventually when people are over-leveled for them, and it gets weird because like then Grandmaster Nightfalls are weirdly like the hardest content in the game for some reason, whereas raids are almost cakewalk. In terms of Vault of Glass itself, I appreciate the updates, and it is kind of wild to imagine that like you used to not need to shoot the oracles in order or anything like that. In terms of the actual encounters, it's nice to be back on Venus. It's cool to kind of explore the intro space. It does make me wish we could, go beyond those boundaries, but I also understand them not needing to bring Venus back as a patrol space if they weren't going to kind of do anything story-wise with the rest of it. So I'm not opposed to this Legends idea and just putting Vault of Glass in that as its own self-contained instance. No, there was not any story developments regarding Vault of Glass either during or after, but I've already kind of talked about that, and while I don't love that, I do sort of understand it, given that Vault of Glass is a free edition of the game, and tying it into this time-limited paid season would be a little odd, so I sort of get what they were doing there. I'm not sure if I agree with that for all future Destiny 1 content, bringing all of it back without integrating it into the story to some degree. Like if the Dreadnought came back, given all the stuff with Atheon, I think it would be very weird to not integrate that at all, but I guess we'll see when it happens. Initial encounters, stand on the plates, very easy, shoot the Cyclopses, and then you make your way inside. It's weird, I do kind of muscle memory remember, at least for some of the hidden chests were, so it was cool to kind of rediscover those passageways again. And then you get to the Templar area, which is, 3 encounters, and the second one, at least on normal, is definitely the hardest. That said, all it takes is a moderate amount of coordination with your team. I also understand the difference between like doing this with like a group of people that are like you're friendly with or or your friends is different than LFGing for this. I do imagine a lot of the Oracle stuff would be frustrating with an LFG team. And then I know, at least from an accessibility-ish like angle, this is not the most accessible raid given all the focus on colors and sound and things like that. So maybe there's some tweaks they could make to make that a little better, but for now, we are just doing the kind of Oracle chime matching. Everyone has discovered that, at least on normal, Xenophage one-shots Oracles, so you can just have a couple people running that to instantly take out Oracles. If not, use a high-impact sniper, and it's almost the same thing. You just have to, keep the hobgoblins in check, and it's not that big of a deal so long as you can at least have, we did the method where you just kind of assign people to stand in places and like stare at a oracle, and if that appears, you just call out whatever number order you are as you're going through it. And then Templar is a whole other thing now, because it was like a hugely challenging part in contest mode on day one, and yet once the power level is lowered and now we're over leveled for it, it's probably the easiest encounter, like the easiest non-cheese encounter in the game. or in the raid, where I mean you can one phase him, absurdly easily with even a moderate amount of coordination. I mean, a single well, a bubble. We didn't even have the bubble last time, and then I get Chaos Reach, and then it's just dual Slugshotty, Anarchy, or Xenophage, or whatever, and it's just not really that hard. You maybe block one teleport, and that's kind of all it takes to burst him down in one phase. So I understand why people are kind of farming the Templar on repeat. It's just wild. Like it's such a different, more difficult encounter when the power level increases, because like if you can't one phase them and you have to go through multiple phases, like it gets overwhelming with the oracles and all the ads and like all this stuff like that. But if you can one phase them, it's blindingly easy. I would say in both runs, the section that took the longest is probably the Gorgon maze, just because, I mean, it's been ages since I ran it, and then, a couple other people that weren't as familiar with it. It's easy to get caught, and like, I mean, even if you do know what you're doing, the sensory array of them is kind of all over the place, so like, you can jump over a gap and think you're fine one run, and then the next run he's looking up for some reason, and it's a little hard to like fully gauge what their range is. This is also complicated by the fact that we keep trying to get the hidden chest in there, and you have to shoot 3 different boxes. I was especially proud of myself that I found the 3rd box all on my own, because the Rick Cactus guide I watched ahead of rerunning this did not have the 3rd box, so tough luck, Rick. What can I say? I'm the superior Destiny raid runner, clearly. It is fun creeping around there, but again, if one person gets caught, the whole thing is over, so that can get a little frustrating when it has nothing to do with you. But since I'm playing with people I know, no one really cares. In my first ever Vault of Glass clear, like way back in the day, like back in D1 launch, when I was doing LFG and I was not like a Destiny community person with a Twitter account I could just siphon people from. That was by far the most difficult part of that. And not only that, there was something that glitched out where none of the platforms would spawn to go over that giant gap. So people just had to, Hercules their way across it. And then I think back then, like Titans just couldn't do it. And so we waited for this one Titan for like 35 minutes or something to get over, because everybody has to be at that door to open it. After that, I did one legit run of Gatekeeper and then one cheese run. My first run was just Prometheus Lens cheese, where one side was using Prometheus Lens and the other side was using the Relic, and it was, it's the most dull encounter ever if you do it that way. I think we have to assume that Bungie is going to patch that out at some point. I don't know if there are other cheeses that I haven't heard about, but that is the most obvious one. Doing it legit was not that hard either. I had a little trouble wrapping my mind around the rotation at first, and like where I was supposed to drop the Relic when I left the portal and things like that. But once you got in a pattern, it was pretty easy as well. So that wasn't that big of a deal. Atheon is probably the most difficult encounter overall, because I mean it's a lot harder to get like a one phase strat down on Atheon. I'm sure people have done it already. I haven't looked it up. But you have to do, the 3 cycles of oracles where all these supplicants are spawning and like holding the portals and like the randomly teleporting people going inside, so you can't always predict what role you're going to have. And we ran into some issues where people got teleported, and then like 2 of those people were the people who were usually making calls, and then we had to scramble to make calls. I think what I found the easiest was to just call the first 2 oracles and not do the 3rd one, because there's no point to adding a 3rd one. It's just confusion. Where I ran into trouble, and where I think a lot of people run into trouble, is sometimes the oracles, like you hear the chime and then you won't see anything, but sometimes it's because it appears like the far one appears directly behind the close one, and it just gets a little confusing. So when that happens, you just kind of assume that's what happens, and I had to kind of throw out some guesses, but it worked out. And I'd say neither time we did Atheon, it took more than a couple of tries. The detain mechanic can be annoying, but we never wiped from that alone. There's always, people were generally pretty good about staying on top of that. For both of these raids, I was running Chaos Reach Warlock, which is fun. It was fun to be able to run Chaos Reach and actually feel like you're doing real DPS and stuff. And I was always leading DPS on my team going Chaos Reach, because you can get maybe 2 off. It depends how you time it. With Geomags, it like extends it so long that you might not get too off, but you do that, and then I was shooting with Xenophage or Anarchy or one of those, and doing good DPS. And I'm never like Mr. Raid Boss DPS leader, so that felt nice for a change. There were just no overly frustrating parts. Granted, I had very competent teams and things went well. I do imagine that doing this through LFG would be much more frustrating than other raids. I don't know. Maybe, I don't think so. Like, I understand that like Oracle Order and positioning and callouts and stuff are a little tricky, but I don't think it would be harder than a lot of the other raids we've had in the past. And this does seem like, even with the changes, like it still seems like kind of a starter raid, which is good. I think the game needs something like that. And Lord knows it needs a free raid because they took away the 5 free raids we had before. In terms of the loot, I haven't had the best of luck with loot yet. I have not had, almost no one has said Mythic Glass drop. It's like a 95% chance you won't get it or something. But I've heard Mythic Glass is underwhelming, which is disappointing to hear. And then I do not have Fatebringer, and I do not have Hezen, and I do have the other ones, but I don't have any like particularly amazing rolls on some of the other ones. I do know that like there are god rolls, for certain weapons, like the reround rounds, high impact sniper is really good, and then Fatebringer, the classic explosive firefly. Hezen can get overload. I have been enjoying my I think it's dynamic sway firefly. Machine gun, that's a really good machine gun. There's a lot of good rolls for that. I think I just got Feeding Frenzy, One for All. I think Subsistence, One for All is a really good roll. Subsistence Firefly, there's a lot of good ones for that. The shotgun, I don't like that archetype. It is way too slow, and if it's good in Crucible, I wouldn't know because I'm not good with shotguns in Crucible. And then Vision of Confluence is my buddy who ran the raid for the first time, and between his normal drops and then the secret chest, which can only give you things you've dropped already, I think he got 5 Vision of Confluences by the end, and like none of them were especially good. I think you can get like a Rewind Firefly or something that's pretty good, or something like that. But I personally have not been like super blown away by the raid loot yet. And this is opposed to like I love the friggin' Splicer seasonal loot. Like those are some of the coolest guns I've used in an extremely long time. So it's a little weird to like, and that's so easily farmable. So it's a little weird to like all those guns more than these new guns. That said, I don't have very many god rolls yet. I am still missing probably the best one from it, Fatebringer, and I would love an Overloads, whatever rounds, lasting impression rounds that sounds very good. So we'll see. I'll keep trying. The armor sets, they didn't update too much. They look a little better, but this was like kind of an era for this and the guns. This is kind of an era before they were really hyper designing gear to like really emulate the raid, and that didn't happen until like Age of Triumphs, where they got like the really cool stuff. I don't think they're doing like Age of Triumph level stuff for Vault of Glass when hard mode gets here. I think they're doing like time lost versions of the weapons, which I imagine are like adept versions. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if they'll have extra perks or things like that, but overall, I'm very happy with how they kind of updated this. And while I do think it's easy to a certain extent, at least if you have a mildly okay team, I think that's perfectly fine. And this seems like a good raid to give to free-to-play players. And it's something I really want to run. Like I want to get all the loot. I want to kind of finish out the armor sets, and this does seem like something that people would probably be more willing to jump into, given that it's not something that is terribly hard to teach new players. And if you're a veteran, it's kind of autopilot at a certain point. So I think it's a good addition. I mean, any season that adds a full raid, even if it's a reprised one, is good in my book. It's not connecting to the story at all, but whatever. I guess I'll get past that. And I would imagine like this really increased the player count by like the most we've seen since Beyond Light itself launched. So I have to imagine that they are going to keep doing stuff like this. We do not know any future Destiny 1 content that is coming now. We kind of have gone through all the stuff they announced. So that has left, everyone kind of wondering what will actually come next in terms of patrol zones or raids or strikes or whatever, or Crucible maps. Wouldn't that be nice? I would imagine that we will see at least 1 or 2 more raids come back. I don't know. I think Crota's End is probably the least out of the 3 left, the least attractive one, shall we say. I think King's Fall is hyper beloved. And then Wrath of the Machine, maybe less people played that since it was at the tail end of the life cycle, but that is also a raid that everybody really loves too. So I think those two maybe would be prioritized over Crota Zen, but Crota Zen might be easier because it's smaller. And then in terms of patrol zones, the only one I really think is honestly even worth bringing back is the Dreadnought. But again, only with some connection to the story and with King's Fall. I don't know if they will do that. They've allegedly shot down the idea that a big D1 zone is coming with Witch Queen. They said that they're not doing that, and Witch Queen is going to be its own new zone only, I believe. That doesn't mean D1 zones can't come during other seasons or something, but nothing like that has been announced yet. And when the Cosmodrome was coming back, they announced that way ahead of time. So if that is happening, it is probably not happening sometime until mid to late 2022, if Witch Queen is early 2022. So that's where we are now. All in all, I think it's a successful experiment, and I am overall impressed with how they updated it and how it feels to play. And even if I'm not like bowled over by nostalgia, because I didn't run Vault of Glass all that much in D1 back, this is back before I'm the ultra super fan I am today. Not that I rate a ton now, but it still felt good to go back. It still feels fun to run now, and I think it's a worthy addition to the game. So those are my kind of thoughts now that I've actually run it, and I kind of want to run it today, so I might figure out if I can do that on my Titan or something. But all right, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.